Hello, this is Jennifer Paloma Hyman. Today is Monday, July 19th, 2021, and it's 7:30 p.m. I'm engaged in an online debate with someone named Joseph Franchetti. I wanted to ask Joseph a question. How do I know you? And can you please introduce yourself to me if I do not know you? Now, I listened, I read what you had written, and I found that I agree with you only on 2 points. We're discussing a serious issue and problem. And secondly, the people crossing the border lack identification. Now, I'm going to disagree with you that the Biden-Harris administration is intentionally overlooking this issue. Biden's deportations and Harris's denial of entry to people in need is a cold, piecemeal, and haphazard response to this immigration crisis. But I don't think that they're playing at having folly here. Now, would you explain to me why Biden-Harris is a disgrace? Is it perhaps because of those camps and the deportations of human persons from lands where they are trying to flee persecution? Now, you go on to talk about the 174,000 persons who were stopped by Border Patrol. You may be reminding us of what happened last March. What happened to these migrants from Mexico, Guatemala, and others from Central America was that they were turned away by the Trump administration. Now, I want to ask you to pay attention to the language that you're using when you talk about immigrants. You describe immigration as an invasion. This way of speaking conceives of immigrants as aliens, foreigners, or even vermin. It is wrong to do this on several accounts. Firstly, it's dehumanizing. Secondly, the southern territory of the United States once belonged to Mexicans. The conquest of Turtle Island, as I call this territory, was part of an invasion. That was an invasion. Now, let us conjure up the memory of the British invasion, where George, Paul, John, and Ringo brought their music here rather than blankets filled with smallpox, hard liquor, firearms, and an ideology that would break a woman or man and turn them into a slave. So, let's ponder why the act of immigration is illegal. Is it for the purpose of population control? Can't we then reevaluate the legitimacy of our laws and overturn them if they're not good ones? You think that the border, crossing the border, is illegal, and it renders those people criminal for the simple act of migrating into the United States. Does that make sense? Many European immigrants will tell you the story of bureaucratic foibles at Ellis Island. But were they told to go back to the countries where they came from? Or were they confined in prison camps? No, of course not. We would not do that to white people. Until you see a doctor, I'm going to tell you, you have no idea whether you carry a disease. And this doesn't matter if you're Mexican, doesn't matter if you're white, doesn't matter if you are black or brown. You simply do not know your status until you go and get tested by a medical professional. So don't deny people entry into this country on account of the fact that they don't know what their health status is. It's precisely for that reason that they need to be invited into this country, which is purportedly supposed to have the best health care in the world. But that's a different conversation. Everyone, I'm going to tell you, everyone wants social benefits unless they think that their wealth is so stable that it will never leave them. And even these people rely on some form of a social safety net. Let's call it Social Security. So we realize that as income taxpayers, we are eligible to receive Social Security checks when we retire. But did you know that Social Security is used as government-backed bonds that lends to private companies? They have Social Security too. Yes, large corporations have Social Security that comes from the taxpayer. So the wealthy, they get their social benefits. They get their welfare in terms of tax breaks and subsidies for their private enterprise. Now tell me, why does a human being fleeing persecution by the state or domestic violence at home or bigotry in their community have to be denied social benefits here in the United States? Are we not wealthy enough? No, we are wealthy enough to do just that. Now let's talk about trafficking, since you are so morally outraged by what's being done to young people's bodies. Trafficking is not only something that these immigrants are doing. Now, you thought that perhaps it was El Chapo or Noriega who created the proliferation of illegal drugs in our community. I'm going to tell you that pharmaceutical companies are peddling drugs more extensively than El Chapo. Now, when you criminalize immigrants, you are actively engaged in some form of, well, I'm going to simply say that you're actively engaged in some form of bigotry. And I think that to erase that bigotry, we need open borders. And yes, I would rely on and want to help implement a trustful vetting procedure that could ensure that girls and women and other persons are legitimately on the path of residency and citizenship. Now, you talk about gangs and weapons, is yet another objection to permitting immigrants from stepping foot here in the United States. But you mention nothing at all about white supremacy and white supremacist terror that has control over the population right now. This terror of white supremacy. And it's really well institutionalized in one of our government lobbies, the National Rifle Association. Now, there are people of all shades who want to be free from gun violence. We seem to only trust the institution of bearing a weapon, legally, legitimately, bearing a weapon, when it's a white person, a white supremacist, shooting a bad hombre. The police force and the border control are gangs legitimized in uniform. And we must recognize that now. Now, the incidents of death that take place at border crossings isn't rare. It's nothing new. I know that you introduced that in order to shock us into the moral wrongness of permitting immigration. But no, the children, and particularly those who are trying to enter this country are entering into dangerous, haphazard conditions. They're navigating a very rough terrain, geologically and politically speaking. Now, this year, a 9-year-old girl died, and large numbers of unaccompanied minors attempt to cross the border by themselves. We should make border crossing safe and family friendly. We should not reduce these migrants to peril and destroy their families with wrongful death and imprisonment. Now understand, these are persons. Whether or not they have citizenship status, these are persons recognized as such under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. This means they have a right to due process, but it is not being implemented. Could these past administrations be doing something unconstitutional? Of course. Now, I agree with you, Joseph. For a moment, it was a terrifying alliance. I agree with you that immigrants need to return to their native homeland if they wish, but certainly without coercion. And Irish women should be able to go back to their homeland. A Slovenian man should be able to go back to his homeland. A Palestinian person should be able to return to their homeland. And I should be able to return to my ancestral Nigeria to make it a better place. But that's not where I intend to stay because I'm an American. Now, you talk about Trump making America great again. Is a laughable oddity at this point in time. But if you are indeed for real, I'm going to tell you that the Trump administration was no good for us, and a second round would not serve us well either at all. Trump exposes us to war and civil strife for reasons that are internal as well as geopolitical. Yes, he wants to amass more wealth and is willing to negotiate with those authoritarian tyrants who were formerly communist governments in order to get access to their resources for more wealth for himself. Now, what we need is a president who will not mislead us. We need a president who will not mislead us with lies, deception, and incitement to violence. Trump exposes us to a second rise in fascism in the United States. Now, those who are from the silent generation, my grandmother's generation, are old enough to remember fascism in the United States. Although back then we were calling it Jim Crow. Now, the earlier rise in fascism had a lot to do with a eugenics policy. Eugenics, derived from the Greek meaning good origin. Well, under this policy, this Jim Crow policy, it included forced sterilization of blacks or those who are deemed genetically unfit to reproduce. Now, Planned Parenthood played a big role in this, and of course you're going to want to look at things from both sides. So don't only read Margaret Sanger, read W.E.B. Du Bois as well. What we want is just the freedom of movement. And it's right there in the First Amendment. It talks about the right to a form of association. Well, let's make sure that the due process rights that we possess via the 14th Amendment, the one that made me a citizen of this country, let's make sure that that allows people to be protected under the Bill of Rights in each and every single state. Thanks for this opportunity. Have a great day.